In this video, we're breaking down 2 hours of Simpsons mysteries and theories. Let's get started. Starting it off with something that should bother you way more than it does. The Simpsons has been on the air since December 17th, 1989, 36 seasons, 788 episodes. It is the longest-running American animated series, the longest-running sitcom, and the longest-running scripted primetime show in the entire history of television. And in all that time, across every single one of those episodes, nobody in Springfield has aged a single day. Bart Simpson is still 10 years old. Lisa is still 8. Maggie is still sucking on that pacifier. Homer still works at the same nuclear power plant for the same ancient billionaire who can't remember his name. And nobody, not the characters, not the townspeople, not a single person in Springfield ever stops and says, "Wait a minute, something is deeply wrong here." But we're going to say it because once you start pulling at the threads of this show, once you start looking at the exposed wiring behind 36 years of jokes and callbacks and continuity errors, you don't find lazy writing. You find patterns. You find buried storylines that the show introduced and never resolved. You find fan theories so elaborate and so well supported by canonical evidence that the writers themselves have been forced to respond to them on the record. And you find a version of Springfield that is far stranger, far darker, and far more disturbing than anything the show has ever acknowledged out loud. So settle in, get comfortable, because for the next 2 hours we're going deeper into Springfield than anyone has ever gone before. And what we find down there might change the way you watch this show forever. Let's start with the big one. The theory that explains everything wrong with Springfield in a single sentence. The Springfield nuclear power plant is mutating the entire town. Not metaphorically, not as a joke, literally. The canonical evidence for this theory is so overwhelming that the real mystery isn't whether the plant is poisoning Springfield. It's how the show has gotten away with telling you this for 36 years straight without anyone taking it seriously. Let's start with what we know for certain. The Springfield nuclear power plant is a 2-unit pressurized water reactor facility owned and operated by Charles Montgomery Burns. It is the primary source of electrical power for the entire town. And it is, by any reasonable standard of measurement, one of the most dangerous industrial facilities in the history of fiction. A surprise safety inspection found 342 violations. 342? The estimated cost to bring the plant up to code was $56 million. Burns refused to spend it. Not because he couldn't afford it. Burns is a billionaire many times over. He refused because fixing the problems would mean admitting they existed. And admitting they existed would mean someone might start asking questions about what those problems had already done to the people living downwind. And the violations aren't minor. We're talking about radioactive waste being dumped directly into bodies of water. Radioactive waste being dumped onto children's playgrounds. Plutonium being used as a paperweight on somebody's desk. Cracked cooling towers that were patched with a wad of chewing gum. Luminous rats running through the bowels of the facility. And here's one that the show drops casually and never revisits. Skeletons in the basement, human skeletons, in the basement of a nuclear power plant. The show never explains who those people were or how they ended up dead inside a working reactor facility. It just shows you the bones and moves on, and nobody in Springfield asks a single question about it. The safety inspector responsible for preventing all of this, the man whose literal job description is to ensure this facility doesn't poison an entire town, is Homer Simpson. A man the show's own creator has stated has an IQ of 55. A man who, in the episode Homer, discovers that a crayon has been lodged in his brain since childhood, physically reducing his cognitive function. A man who sleeps at his workstation, eats donuts during meltdown warnings, and once caused a nuclear incident by throwing a donut into the reactor core to see if it would grow bigger. That is the person standing between Springfield and radioactive catastrophe. And he has been standing there, failing at that job for over 3 decades. Now here's where the theory gets teeth. The very first visible mutant in Springfield appears in Season 2. Blinky, the three-eyed fish. Blinky is pulled from a river near the power plant and immediately becomes national news within the show. A gubernatorial candidate uses Blinky as evidence that Burns is poisoning the environment. Burns is forced to eat the fish on live television to prove it's harmless. The town watches, shrugs, and moves on. Nobody conducts a follow-up study. Nobody tests the water. Nobody asks the obvious question: if the fish have three eyes, what's happening to the people drinking the same water? The answer has been staring at us since season 8. In the episode The Springfield Files, Homer sees what he believes is an alien in the woods near Springfield. The entire town panics. FBI agents. Mulder and Scully are called in to investigate. The episode builds toward a dramatic reveal, and when the truth finally comes out, the alien isn't an alien at all. It's Mr. Burns. Burns has been undergoing a weekly medical treatment so intensive, so loaded with chemicals and radiation therapy, that it gives his entire body what the show describes as a healthy green glow. The treatments keep him alive for exactly 1 more week. Without them, he dies. The regimen is so extreme that after each session, Burns wanders out of the facility in a dazed, euphoric state, stumbling through the woods like a creature from another world. He literally glows in the dark. That's not a metaphor. Burns is so saturated with radiation that his body emits visible light. And the people of Springfield see this glowing figure in the forest, and their first instinct is, it must be an alien from outer space. Not radiation, not the power plant that dominates their skyline. An alien. That's how deep the denial runs, and in the Simpsons movie, the evidence becomes impossible to ignore. Springfield's environmental contamination reaches a point so catastrophic that the Environmental Protection Agency, a real federal agency operating within the show's universe, determines that the town must be sealed under a massive glass dome to prevent its pollution from spreading to the rest of the country. Think about that for a second. The United States government looked at Springfield and concluded that the entire town was so toxic, so dangerous, so fundamentally contaminated that the only solution was physical containment. Springfield isn't just polluted, Springfield is classified as an environmental hazard by the federal government. The town is a contamination zone, and the people inside it, every single resident who has been drinking that water, breathing that air, and living downwind of that cracked reactor for decades, they're still inside the dome when it goes up. Now look at the residents themselves. Look at them closely. Homer Simpson, massive overbite. Bulging eyes, 4 fingers on each hand. A skull shape that defies human biology. An IQ so low it qualifies as a clinical disability. A body that can absorb punishment that would kill any normal human being 10 times over. He's been shot, electrocuted, fallen off cliffs, been hit by cars, survived explosions, and walked away from every single one of them. His healing rate is absurd, his pain tolerance is inhuman, and he has worked inside that nuclear facility in direct proximity to an active reactor core for the entirety of his adult life. Marge Simpson, same bulging eyes, same 4 fingers. Hair that defies the laws of physics and gravity, growing straight up in a tower that she has maintained in the exact same shape for 36 years. Marge was briefly employed at the Springfield nuclear power plant herself. She was exposed to the same facility, the same violations, the same leaking radiation, and her children, all 3 of them, were born after both parents had already been soaking in Springfield's contaminated environment for years. Bart, Lisa, Maggie, all born in Springfield, all raised in Springfield, all drinking the same water, breathing the same air, living under the shadow of those cracked, cooling towers every single day of their lives. And every single one of them displays physical characteristics that do not occur in normal human populations. The spiky hair that maintains its shape without product, the overbites, the bulging eyes, the yellow skin that covers every resident of this town and no one else. Because here's the detail that makes this theory click into place. When celebrities visit Springfield, when guest characters arrive from outside the town, they look different. Not slightly different, fundamentally different. Their proportions are more natural, their eyes are more normally shaped, their features more closely resemble actual human anatomy. The show draws outsiders with more realistic proportions than it draws Springfield residents. And the explanation that everyone accepts is, oh, that's just the art style. That's just how The Simpsons looks. But within the logic of the show's own universe, there is a visible, observable difference between people who live in Springfield and people who don't. The people inside the contamination zone look mutated. The people outside it look normal. Even the animals are affected. Santa's little helper, the Simpson family dog, has the same bulging eyes as his owners. The same proportions that deviate from real canine anatomy. Blinky the fish has 3 eyes. Springfield's wildlife is demonstrably mutated by the power plant's runoff. The show tells you this directly. It shows you a 3-eyed fish and says this is what the radiation is doing to living organisms. And then it expects you to believe that the exact same radiation has had 0 effect on the humans living in the same environment. Burns knows. He has always known. The show makes this explicit across multiple episodes. Burns funds private medical research. He has personal physicians. He undergoes weekly treatments that keep him alive through what amounts to chronic radiation poisoning. Burns understands radiation better than anyone in Springfield because he is personally dependent on managing its effects in his own body. He has the resources, he has the infrastructure, he has an entire pharmaceutical division capable of synthesizing experimental treatments. He knows what radiation does to biological systems because radiation is keeping him alive. And he knows what his plant is doing to Springfield because Springfield is his laboratory. And Homer's continued employment isn't a mistake. It isn't Burns being negligent or forgetful. It's strategy. When German investors briefly purchased the plant, the first thing they did was fire Homer. The second thing they did was assess the cost of bringing the facility up to code and nearly went bankrupt from the estimate alone. Burns bought the plant back and immediately rehired Homer. A competent safety inspector would shut that plant down within a week. Homer ensures the violations continue. The radiation keeps leaking. The water stays poisoned. And Burns maintains his monopoly over Springfield's power supply, its economy, and by extension, its entire population. A population too cognitively impaired by decades of radiation exposure to realize what's happening to them. The crayon in Homer's brain isn't the full story. Season 12 reveals that Homer once had the crayon removed and his IQ skyrocketed to genius level. He became intelligent, articulate, capable of understanding the world around him for the first time. And it made him miserable. He saw Springfield for what it really was. He saw his job for what it really was. He saw his life clearly for the first time, and it was unbearable. So he had the crayon put back in. He chose stupidity. He chose the fog. But here's the question the show never asks. How did a crayon get lodged in a child's brain in the first place without anyone noticing? How did Homer go through his entire childhood, his entire adolescence, his entire adult life, visiting doctors in Springfield, getting checkups from Springfield medical professionals, and not a single one of them found a foreign object in his skull? Either every doctor in Springfield is incompetent beyond comprehension, or someone knew it was there and chose not to remove it. And if the medical establishment in Springfield is compromised, if the doctors are looking the other way while radiation eats through their patients' neurons, if Burns's influence extends into the healthcare infrastructure of the town he essentially owns, then Homer's crayon isn't just an accident. It's a metaphor the show is using to tell you something it can't say directly. The people of Springfield have something wrong with their brains, something that keeps them dumb and compliant and incapable of looking up at those cracked cooling towers and asking the most basic question a human being can ask. Why are we all like this? The radiation theory doesn't explain one mystery about The Simpsons, it explains all of them. The characters don't age because their mutated biology has been fundamentally altered at the cellular level. The town resets after catastrophic events because the population's memory function is compromised by chronic neurological damage. Homer survives injuries that should kill him because his body has adapted to radiation in ways that make him nearly indestructible, but cognitively devastated. Burns stays alive through treatments that would kill a normal human because he's been managing his own radiation exposure for over a century with resources nobody else in town has access to. And nobody in Springfield questions any of this because the same poison that mutated their bodies also damaged the part of their brains responsible for critical thinking. Springfield isn't a quirky cartoon town, it's a contamination zone. The residents aren't eccentric, they're symptomatic. And the nuclear power plant that dominates their skyline, that provides their electricity, that employs their neighbors and poisons their water and irradiates their children, isn't a background gag. It's the cause. It has always been the cause. Every yellow face, every bulging eye, every impossible recovery from fatal injury, every forgotten catastrophe, every reset, every unexplained mystery. It all traces back to the same cracked cooling tower, leaking the same invisible poison into the same water supply, feeding the same damaged brains that can't figure out why their fish have 3 eyes and their children have 4 fingers. The Springfield nuclear power plant isn't just part of the show, it is the show. And nobody in Springfield will ever figure that out, because the plant already made sure they can't. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Homer's coma theory. And this one is going to reframe everything you just heard about Springfield. Because what if the radiation theory is correct, but only inside the mind of a man who has been unconscious since 1993? On April 1st, 1993, the 18th episode of Season 4 aired. It was called So It's Come to This, a Simpsons clip show. The premise was straightforward. Bart plays a series of April Fool's pranks on Homer, escalating each time, until he takes one of Homer's beer cans to an auto body shop and places it inside an industrial paint shaker. When Homer opens the can, the explosion is so violent it sends him to the hospital. While Homer is lying in his hospital bed recovering, he sees a vending machine across the room. He tries to get a candy bar. The machine tips over, crushes him, and puts him into a coma. A real coma, not a cutaway gag, not a dream sequence. Homer Simpson flatlines and enters a clinically unconscious state that lasts for 7 weeks. Now the episode ends with Homer seemingly waking up. Bart tearfully confesses at his bedside that the whole thing was his fault, and Homer springs awake and immediately starts strangling his son. The family laughs. Homer laughs. Everything goes back to normal. The show tells you he woke up, but here's the thing. The show also tells you in the final moments of that same episode that Homer lost 5% of his brain function during the coma. 5% gone, destroyed, never coming back. And Homer's response to learning that he's permanently brain damaged is to laugh, even though he says he doesn't understand why he's laughing. The family finds this charming. Nobody finds it alarming. The episode ends, and The Simpsons continues for 32 more years, as if nothing happened. Unless nothing did happen. Unless Homer never woke up at all. This is the Homer coma theory, and it is the single most popular, most debated, and most internally consistent fan theory in the history of The Simpsons. The basic premise, originally proposed by a Reddit user called Hard Topic a Name, is simple. Homer did not wake up from his coma in April 1993. Every single episode that has aired since that date, every storyline, every character development, every guest appearance, every impossible event is a dream being generated by the comatose mind of a man lying in a hospital bed in Springfield General, slowly losing brain function while his family sits beside him and waits for him to open his eyes. The evidence is genuinely unsettling. Let's walk through it. Before the coma episode, The Simpsons was a grounded show. Not realistic exactly, it was always a cartoon. But the storylines dealt with recognizable human problems. Homer tries to quit drinking. Marge considers infidelity. Lisa develops a crush on a substitute teacher. Bart struggles with his grades and faces the possibility of being held back a year. These are everyday family problems told through the lens of satire, but they're rooted in the kind of situations real families experience: financial stress, marital tension, academic failure. The show's emotional core was built on relatable domestic struggles. After the coma, everything changes. The shift isn't subtle, it's seismic. Homer goes to space. Mr. Burns captures the Loch Ness Monster. Homer becomes the leader of a vigilante group. Homer joins a secret society. Homer discovers his mother as a fugitive radical. Homer meets God. Twice. The show goes from a family sitcom grounded in economic anxiety to a show where the main character has met multiple presidents, traveled to dozens of countries, held hundreds of different jobs, befriended celebrities, and survived physical trauma that would kill a platoon of Marines. The escalation is so dramatic that even casual fans have noticed the tonal shift. The internet has been debating when The Simpsons got bad for 20 years. The coma theory argues that the answer is precise. The Simpsons didn't get bad. Homer's brain got worse. And here's the detail that makes the theory haunt you. 6 months before the coma episode in the season 4 premiere Homer the Heretic, Homer has a conversation with God, an actual face-to-face conversation. And during that conversation, God tells Homer that he will learn the meaning of life, but not yet. God says Homer's time is coming. 6 months later, Homer's in a coma. The timeline matches. God told Homer his time was nearly up. And 6 months later, Homer's conscious life ended. What the show presents as a quirky theological gag reads, under the coma theory, as a prophecy. God was telling Homer that his waking life was about to end, and everything that followed would be the dream of a dying man desperately trying to hold on to his family. The aging problem. This is the single piece of evidence that the coma theory explains more elegantly than any other theory in existence. Nobody in The Simpsons ages. Bart has been 10 years old for 36 years. Lisa has been 8. Maggie has been 1. Homer and Marge haven't gained a wrinkle. The show uses a floating timeline where the present is always the present and the past reshapes itself to fit, but the characters remain locked at the same age forever. Every theory attempts to explain this. The radiation theory says mutated biology prevents aging. The cartoon logic explanation says it's just how animated shows work. But the coma theory has the simplest, most emotionally devastating answer. Nobody ages because they exist inside the mind of a man who went to sleep in April 1993 and never woke up. Of course, his children don't age. His unconscious brain can't imagine them growing up because he wasn't there to see it happen. His wife doesn't age because the last time he saw her, she looked exactly like that. His friends don't change because his memory of them is frozen at the moment the vending machine fell. Homer's coma dream preserves his world exactly as it was on the day he lost it. Because that's what comas do to the mind. They lock you in place. They freeze the world at the last moment you experienced it. And every episode since April 1993 is Homer's brain running simulations of a life he's no longer living, using the only reference material it has: the world as it existed on the day he went under. The celebrity appearances make sense under this theory too. Homer's coma brain, receiving ambient stimuli from the hospital room, processes sounds from the television, from conversations happening at his bedside, from the radio. It hears names, voices, cultural references, and it incorporates them into the dream. That's why later seasons are flooded with celebrity guest appearances. It's not that Springfield became a magnet for famous people. It's that Homer's brain is absorbing fragments of external media and weaving them into his dream world. Every celebrity who shows up in Springfield is actually a voice Homer heard through the fog of unconsciousness. translated into a dream character by a brain that's trying desperately to keep the simulation running. The show itself acknowledged this theory. In season 34, the episode Lisa the Boy Scout includes a deliberately leaked, fake deleted scene in which Homer wakes up from a long coma, revealing that every outlandish episode was just a dream. The show's writers created this as a direct reference to the fan theory. They animated it, they showed it to the audience, and then they said, "Just kidding, it's not real, it was a hoax scene planted by hackers." But the fact that they made it at all tells you something. The writers know about the theory. They've engaged with it. They've acknowledged that it holds together. And their denial, their insistence that Homer isn't in a coma, came wrapped inside an episode that explicitly depicted Homer waking up from a coma. They showed you the truth and told you it was a joke, and the audience laughed, just like Homer laughed when he was told he'd lost 5% of his brain. Executive producer Al Jean addressed the theory directly in 2015. He said it isn't true. He dismissed it as fan speculation. But here's what Al Jean didn't address. He didn't explain why nobody ages. He didn't explain the tonal shift after season 4. He didn't explain why God told Homer his time was coming 6 months before the coma. He didn't explain why the show has become progressively more surreal and detached from reality with each passing season, exactly as you'd expect from a dream being generated by a brain that's slowly deteriorating. He just said it's not true, and the interviewer moved on. But the fans didn't move on, because the theory does something that no official explanation has ever done. It makes the show make sense. All of it. The aging freeze, the tonal shift, the celebrity flood, the increasingly cartoonish plots, the reset button that erases consequences between episodes, the fact that Homer can survive anything, endure anything, recover from anything, because nothing is actually happening to his body. His body is in a hospital bed, only his mind is in Springfield. And his mind can't kill him because his mind is the one telling the story. And here's the part that stays with you long after you close the Reddit thread. If the coma theory is true, then the emotional core of The Simpsons isn't comedy, it's tragedy. Homer's deepest, most desperate wish is so simple it breaks your heart. He wants his family. That's it. He wants Marge to still love him. He wants Bart to still be his mischievous little boy. He wants Lisa to still play her saxophone. He wants Maggie to still be small enough to hold. He wants Friday night at the Simpsons house to last forever. And in the coma, it does. The dream gives him everything he wants. His family, preserved in amber. His children, never growing up. His wife, never leaving. His life, never ending. Homer's coma isn't a nightmare. It's the only heaven a man like Homer Simpson would ever ask for. A house on Evergreen Terrace where the kids are always young and the beer is always cold and nobody ever has to say goodbye. The coma theory doesn't ruin The Simpsons. It makes every episode an act of love. A dying man dreaming about his family because they're the only thing worth dreaming about. And every time Homer survives something impossible, every time the world resets, every time the credits roll and everything goes back to normal, it's not lazy writing. It's Homer's brain refusing to let the story end. Because if the story ends, if the dream stops, if the simulation finally crashes, then Homer has to wake up. And waking up means finding out how much time has passed, how old his children really are, whether Marge waited, whether anyone is still sitting by his bed, or worse, not waking up at all. That's the coma theory. Homer Simpson has been dreaming since April 1993, and every episode you've watched since then is a love letter from an unconscious father to the family he can't reach. The show will never confirm this, but it will never disprove it either, because the evidence is baked into the structure of the show itself. Nobody ages. Reality keeps getting stranger, and Homer always finds his way home by the end of the episode. Because in his dream, he never left. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the greatest mystery in the history of The Simpsons, and arguably the greatest mystery in the history of animated television. Who really shot Mr. Burns? Now, before you say Maggie, we know. The show told us it was Maggie. Season 7, Episode 1, Who Shot Mr. Burns, Part 2. Case closed. Baby did it. Move on. Except the case was never really closed because the evidence doesn't add up the way the show wants you to think it does. And the more you look at this mystery, the more you realize that the official answer might be the biggest cover-up in Springfield history. Let's go back to the beginning. Season 6, Episode 25, Who Shot Mr. Burns, Part 1. This was the summer of 1995, and The Simpsons pulled off something that had never been attempted by an animated show before. A genuine whodunit cliffhanger. A mystery designed so meticulously that the show's creators invited viewers to participate in a national contest to guess the shooter. The winner would be animated into an actual episode. Fox promoted it like a cultural event. America's Most Wanted produced a tie-in special called Springfield's Most Wanted, treating the fictional crime like a real unsolved case. The Simpsons wasn't just a TV show that summer, it was a national puzzle. And the puzzle was this: Mr. Burns had gone too far. He'd stolen an oil well from beneath Springfield Elementary, gutting the school's budget. He'd shut down Moe's Tavern by bankrupting its owner. He'd created a sinkhole that destroyed the Springfield retirement castle. He'd injured Santa's little helper, the Simpson family dog. And for his grand finale, he built a giant mechanical disc and used it to block out the sun over the entire town. Not figuratively, Burns literally stole the sun from Springfield so he could force every resident to buy their electricity from his power plant. When Smithers protested, Burns fired him on the spot. By the end of Part 1, every single person in Springfield had a reason to want Burns dead. Every single one. The show took its time establishing motives for dozens of characters. Homer, because Burns could never remember his name despite Homer working for him for years. Bart and Lisa, because the school lost its funding. Grandpa, because the retirement home was destroyed. Groundskeeper Willie, because he lost his job. Tito Puente, because Burns cut the music program. Moe, because his bar went under. Even Smithers, freshly fired and spiraling into alcoholism. The entire town gathered at a public meeting to confront Burns, and the tension was so thick that multiple characters were shown holding weapons. Then Burns collapsed, a single gunshot wound. He staggered onto the town sundial and fell, his hands landing on two specific letters, W and S. Or, if you looked at it from Burns' perspective, M and S. The ambulance carried him away. The screen went black. And America had to wait an entire summer to find out who pulled the trigger. Here's what the show told us when the answer finally came. When Part 2 aired in September 1995, the investigation plays out like a comedic procedural. Chief Wegham and the Springfield police fumble through the case. Smithers confesses immediately, but his confession falls apart when they realize he was blackout drunk at the time and actually shot a different person entirely. He shot old Jasper in his wooden leg. Not Burns, wrong victim, wrong location, wrong crime. One by one, suspects are eliminated. Principal Skinner has an alibi. Moe has an alibi. Tito Puente has the greatest alibi in television history, a full musical number explaining that he channeled his rage into a samba. The investigation stalls until police find a key piece of evidence, an eyelash on Burns' suit. They run DNA analysis. The eyelash belongs to a Simpson. The evidence points to Homer. His fingerprints are on the gun. He had the clearest motive of anyone in town. Burns couldn't even remember his name, which had driven Homer to a breaking point. Homer is arrested. He's about to be convicted. And then Burns wakes up from his coma. He looks around the hospital room. And he identifies his shooter. It was Maggie. Baby Maggie Simpson. According to Burns' account, he encountered Maggie in the parking lot after the town meeting. He attempted to take her lollipop. In the struggle, his gun fell from his holster. Maggie picked it up. The gun went off, Burns was shot, and the mystery was solved. Except it wasn't. Let's start with the contest. Fox invited viewers across America to submit their guesses for who shot Burns. The prize was significant. The winner would be animated into a future episode of the show. Thousands upon thousands of entries were submitted. And according to the DVD commentary for the episodes, not a single person from the randomly selected sample of entries guessed the correct answer. Nobody won. The person who was awarded the prize was chosen randomly from the sample pool. And since they didn't have the right answer, they received a cash payment instead of being animated. The show's writers acknowledged on the commentary that they were aware of one person who posted the correct answer to a Simpsons newsgroup online on the night of the original broadcast. But this person was using a college internet account, and by the time the contest ended and the producers tried to track them down, the account was no longer active. They literally could not find the one person who got it right. They even issued an open invitation on the DVD release for that person to come forward. As far as anyone knows, they never did. Think about what that means. The show's creators designed a mystery, told the public it was solvable from the clues in part 1, promoted a national contest around it, and then when the answer was revealed, essentially nobody had figured it out. Either the clues were insufficient, the red herrings were too effective, or the answer didn't logically follow from the evidence the way the show claimed it did. Now let's look at the clues themselves. Burns falls on the sundial. His hands point to W and S, or from his perspective, M and S. The show tells us this means Maggie Simpson, M for Maggie, S for Simpson, case closed. But Burns himself stated, canonically on the record, that his hands pointing at those letters was not intentional. He didn't deliberately position himself to spell out his attacker's initials. He just fell. The sundial clue, the central piece of evidence that the show uses to justify its answer, was explicitly described by the victim as a coincidence. The biggest clue and the biggest mystery in the show's history is meaningless according to the person it supposedly came from. Then there's the gun. Burns carried a gun in a holster. Shortly before the shooting, the holster is shown empty. The gun was already missing from his person before the attack. Whoever shot Burns used his own weapon. This means the shooter was someone who didn't bring a gun to the town meeting. Most of the suspects at the meeting already had weapons. They brought them specifically because they were angry enough at Burns to consider violence. The person who shot Burns was someone who wasn't armed, who didn't plan to shoot anyone, who encountered Burns' gun by chance and used it impulsively. A baby finding a gun on the ground fits this profile. So does about a dozen other characters who weren't carrying weapons that night. Burns' last words before being shot were, "Oh, it's you." He recognized his attacker. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't afraid. He said it's you the way you'd greet someone you've met before, but don't consider a threat. Does Mr. Burns recognize Maggie Simpson? Has he ever interacted with her in a meaningful way prior to this episode? The show doesn't establish a relationship between Burns and Maggie before this event. Burns barely recognizes Homer, and Homer works for him. The idea that Burns would see a baby and calmly say, "Oh, it's you," as if acknowledging a familiar acquaintance, doesn't track with a man who can't remember the name of his own employee. Now here's where it gets interesting. In season 18, Homer claims that he was actually the one who shot Burns. He just says it, out loud, on camera, and nobody reacts, nobody investigates, nobody reopens the case. Homer confesses to the attempted murder of the richest man in Springfield, and the show treats it like a throwaway line. Either Homer is lying for attention, which is entirely possible given his character, or the original verdict was wrong and Homer knows it because he's the one who actually pulled the trigger. And if Homer did it, then Maggie was framed. A baby was blamed for a crime committed by her father. And the evidence that supposedly proved Maggie's guilt, the DNA, the sundial, Burns' testimony from a man who just woke up from a coma with a bullet wound, was either manufactured, misinterpreted, or both. One of the most compelling alternate theories comes from a Reddit user who argues that Marge was the real shooter. The case is surprisingly strong. Marge is a devoted mother who watched Burns destroy her children's school, injure her family's dog, and steal the sun from her town. She had every reason to want Burns gone. Burns fell in love with Marge in the episode Marge Gets a Job, which the theorist argues explains why Burns wouldn't identify her as the shooter. He protected her. He took the bullet, woke up, and rather than name the woman he'd been infatuated with, he pointed at the sundial and let the town draw its own conclusions. Maggie became the answer because Maggie was convenient. A baby can't be prosecuted. Chief Wagham says it himself. No jury in the world would convict a baby. Except maybe Texas. Maggie was the perfect fall guy. An infant too young to deny the accusation, too young to understand what she was being accused of, and too young to ever be punished for it. If someone in Springfield's power structure wanted to protect the real shooter, blaming Maggie was the cleanest possible solution. And the show knows this theory holds water. The final shot of Part 2 shows Maggie alone in the room after everyone else has left. She looks around carefully to make sure nobody is watching. Then she moves her pacifier in a motion that mimics gunfire. The show wants you to read this as confirmation. Maggie did it and she knows what she did. But you could just as easily read it as a baby imitating something she saw someone else do. She watched someone shoot Burns. She's repeating the motion because that's what babies do. They mimic the adults around them. Maggie isn't confessing, she's remembering. The alternate endings prove that even the writers weren't fully committed to the Maggie answer. A complete alternate conclusion was animated in which Smithers is revealed as the shooter, full length, fully voiced, fully produced. This ending was shown in The Simpsons' 138th episode Spectacular, a clip show hosted by Troy McClure, who dismisses the Smithers ending by saying it wouldn't have made sense because all the Simpson DNA evidence would have to be ignored, which would be downright nutty. That line is itself a reference to the O.J. Simpson trial, where a jury ignored DNA evidence to reach an acquittal. The show is winking at you. It's telling you that ignoring DNA evidence happens all the time. It's telling you that the official answer isn't necessarily the right answer. It's telling you that the evidence can point in whatever direction the people in power want it to point. An early draft of the script had Barney Gumble as the shooter. The writers considered this seriously because they couldn't figure out what else to do with his character at the time. They planned to send him to prison. This was abandoned. But the fact remains that the show's own creators cycled through multiple shooters before landing on Maggie. The answer wasn't predetermined by the clues. The clues were adjusted to fit whatever answer the writers eventually chose. The mystery was reverse engineered. And here's the question nobody asks. In a town where every single person had a motive, where dozens of people were carrying weapons, where the victim had just stolen the sun from the entire community, how is it possible that only one person acted? Springfield is not a town known for restraint. These people riot at the drop of a hat. They form mobs over trivial disputes. They burned down their own town hall once because of a misunderstanding about a bear. But when Mr. Burns blocks out the sun and threatens the survival of every living thing in the community, only one person pulls the trigger? Either Springfield's population is significantly more docile than the show has ever portrayed them, or the shooting wasn't as spontaneous as the official story suggests. Maybe someone planned it. Maybe someone with access to Burns' schedule, knowledge of his gun, and enough influence to redirect the investigation toward a suspect who could never be convicted. Someone like Smithers, who was fired that day and knew Burns' every move. Someone like Homer, who finally snapped after years of being ignored by his own employer. Someone like Marge, who watched her family systematically destroyed by one man's greed. Or someone else entirely, someone we haven't considered because the show never wanted us to consider them. The official answer is Maggie Simpson. The show committed to it. The writers stand behind it. And the DVD commentary treats it as settled. But the contest nobody won, the clues that Burns himself said were meaningless, the alternate endings that were fully animated, Homer's unexamined confession in season 18, and the final shot of Maggie mimicking gunfire in an empty room, all of it suggests that the greatest mystery in Simpsons history was never actually solved. It was closed. And in Springfield, those are two very different things. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to something the show has been dancing around for over 3 decades without ever committing to an answer. How is Mr. Burns still alive? This isn't a rhetorical question. This isn't a joke about cartoon logic. Within the established canon of The Simpsons, Charles Montgomery Burns is a medical impossibility. His age has been stated, implied, and contradicted across dozens of episodes, but every version of the timeline places his birth somewhere in the late 1800s. He has referenced personal memories from before the turn of the 20th century. He has told stories about events from the 1910s as though he experienced them firsthand. He has described working relationships with historical figures who died before most of the show's audience was born. By the most conservative estimate, Burns is well over 100 years old. By the most liberal reading of the show's continuity, he might be pushing 140. And he doesn't just exist, he functions. He runs a multi-billion-dollar corporation, he manipulates municipal politics, he orchestrates schemes that require sustained cognitive effort, long-term planning, and a working understanding of modern technology, modern finance, and modern law. His body is frail, yes. His physical strength is almost non-existent, but his mind is razor sharp. Mr. Burns is arguably the most intelligent character in Springfield, operating with a strategic ruthlessness that nobody in town can match, and he has been operating at that level for longer than any human being should be capable of sustained consciousness. The show addresses this directly in the Springfield Files. As we discussed earlier, Burns undergoes a weekly medical regimen so extreme that it causes his body to emit a visible green glow. The treatment keeps him alive for exactly 7 more days. Then he needs another dose. Without it, he dies. The show presents this as a throwaway gag, an explanation for why Homer saw a glowing alien in the woods, but the implications are staggering. Burns is not surviving through natural biological processes. He is being kept alive artificially through a recurring medical intervention that has to be administered on a precise weekly schedule. Miss one treatment, and Burns dies. The margin for error is 0. His life is maintained the way you maintain a machine, through scheduled servicing. And the treatment itself involves radiation. Of course it does. The man who owns a nuclear power plant, the man whose facility has been leaking radioactive material into Springfield's water supply for decades, is personally dependent on controlled radiation exposure to sustain his own biological functions. Burns isn't just profiting from radiation, he's powered by it. His body has been so fundamentally altered by decades of proximity to nuclear material that it can no longer sustain itself through normal cellular processes. He requires external radiation input the way a normal human requires food and water. Take it away and his system shut down within a week. This explains something that the show has depicted repeatedly but never addressed: Burns' immune system. In one of the most famous scenes in the series, Burns visits a doctor who informs him that he has every disease known to medical science. Every single one, simultaneously. The doctor explains that Burns' diseases are all present in his body at the same time, but they exist in a state of perfect equilibrium, each one canceling out the others. The doctor calls it Three Stooges syndrome, comparing it to 3 people trying to fit through a doorway at once. None of them can get through. Burns' diseases are all trying to kill him simultaneously. But because they're all present at once, they create a biological gridlock that prevents any single illness from progressing. The doctor's conclusion is that Burns is the sickest man in the United States, but functionally indestructible because everything that should kill him is being blocked by everything else that should kill him. This is played for laughs. It's one of the show's most quoted scenes. But if you accept the radiation theory, it makes a terrifying kind of sense. Burns' body isn't maintaining this disease equilibrium through any natural process. The weekly radiation treatments are doing it. The treatments don't cure his diseases, they manage them. They keep every illness in perfect stasis, balanced against every other illness, preventing any single condition from gaining dominance and killing him. It's not medicine in any conventional sense. It's nuclear maintenance. Burns' body is a reactor, and his weekly treatments are the equivalent of adjusting the control rods to prevent a meltdown. Smithers isn't just a loyal assistant. He's the only person who fully understands how Burns' medical protocol works. Smithers manages Burns' schedule. Smithers ensures Burns makes every weekly appointment. Smithers monitors Burns' physical condition with the kind of vigilance that borders on obsession. And the show has established repeatedly that if Smithers ever left, if he was ever removed from his position, Burns would be helpless. Not emotionally helpless, physically helpless. Without Smithers managing the treatment schedule, Burns would miss a dose. The disease equilibrium would collapse, and every illness in his body would surge forward simultaneously. Smithers isn't devoted to Burns out of love alone. He's devoted because he knows that his absence is a death sentence. Smithers is keeping Burns alive through logistical competence, and he knows it, and that knowledge is the foundation of their entire relationship. Burns' connection to historical events adds another layer to the immortality question. The show has depicted Burns interacting with or referencing an absurd number of historical moments. He has described personal involvement in events spanning from the early 1900s through the present day. He knew Howard Hughes, he attended Yale, he served in World War II, though his role was morally questionable at best. He stole $1 trillion bill from the United States government during the war and kept it hidden for decades. He has referenced the Gilded Age not as history but as personal experience. His family wealth predates the Industrial Revolution, and his family, the Burns dynasty, extends back centuries. The show has depicted the Burns family tree as one of the oldest and most consistently powerful lineages in American history. They weren't just wealthy, they were the kind of wealthy that shapes nations, the kind of wealthy that builds infrastructure and then charges everyone else to use it. The kind of wealthy that exists so far above the law that the concept of legal accountability becomes theoretical rather than practical. Burns inherited this legacy and has been extending it for well over a century. He didn't just build an empire. He maintained one that was already ancient when he took control. The question the show never answers is whether Burns is unique or whether his family has always found ways to extend their lifespans beyond normal human limits. If the Burns dynasty has existed for centuries, and if the current Burns has been alive for over 100 years through artificial means, is it possible that previous Burns patriarchs employed similar strategies? Before nuclear radiation, before modern medicine, before any of the technology that currently keeps Burns alive, did the Burns family use other methods to extend their hold on power? The show doesn't say. But it does establish that the Burns family has been in continuous control of their fortune for longer than most American institutions have existed. That kind of continuity doesn't happen through normal generational succession. It requires either extraordinary luck or extraordinary measures. And there's the matter of Burns's relationship with death itself. Burns has come closer to dying than almost any other character on the show. He's been shot by Maggie Simpson. He's been hospitalized dozens of times. He's collapsed, fallen, been attacked, been poisoned, been abandoned in the wilderness. And every single time he comes back, not through cartoon resilience the way Homer survives things. Burns comes back through infrastructure, through money, through medical intervention, through the machinery of wealth that ensures no matter what happens to his body, there will always be someone standing by with the resources to rebuild him. Homer survives because the show needs him to survive. Burns survives because he has spent a century building a system designed to ensure his survival regardless of what happens to his physical form. Homer's immortality is passive. Burns' immortality is engineered. Every dollar he's ever spent, every institution he's ever corrupted, every politician he's ever bought, every doctor he's ever retained, it all serves one purpose. Keep Burns alive. Keep the treatments coming. Keep the diseases balanced. Keep the reactor running. Because if Burns dies, his empire dies with him. and empires don't allow themselves to die. The scariest part of the Burns immortality theory isn't that he might live forever, it's that Springfield needs him too. The town's economy depends on the power plant. The power plant depends on Burns. Burns depends on the treatments. The treatments depend on the infrastructure that Burns' wealth provides. It's a closed loop, a self-sustaining system where the man, the machine, and the money all feed each other in an endless cycle. Springfield can't kill Burns because Springfield can't survive without Burns. And Burns can't die because dying would mean the system he built finally has to answer for what it's done to the people living inside it. Mr. Burns is the oldest man in Springfield. He might be the oldest man in America. He is kept alive by weekly radiation treatments, sustained by a fortune that predates the nation itself, protected by an employee whose devotion is functionally a medical necessity, and surrounded by a population too damaged to question why their employer glows in the dark and remembers the Spanish-American War. He's not immortal, he's something worse. He's too expensive to die, and Springfield will keep paying the bill for as long as Burns keeps the lights on, which, if his treatment schedule holds, will be forever. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the episode that broke The Simpsons. Not in terms of quality, not in terms of ratings, in terms of reality. The episode that proves Springfield doesn't operate on the same rules as the rest of the world. And once you understand what this episode actually revealed, every continuity error in the show's history stops being an error and starts being evidence. Season 9, Episode 2, The Principal and the Pauper. This episode aired on September 28, 1997. And it detonated like a bomb inside the show's fan base. The backlash was immediate, it was intense, and it has never fully subsided. 28 years later, fans still cite this episode as the moment The Simpsons went wrong. The moment the writers stopped caring about continuity. The moment the show betrayed its audience's trust. But what if the fans have been reading the betrayal backwards? What if this episode didn't break The Simpsons? What if it revealed what The Simpsons had always been? Here's what happens. Springfield Elementary holds an event honoring Principal Seymour Skinner's 20 years of service to the school. During the celebration, a stranger walks in, a man nobody recognizes. He introduces himself as Sergeant Seymour Skinner, the real Seymour Skinner, a decorated Vietnam War veteran who was believed dead after being captured as a prisoner of war in Southeast Asia. He survived, he escaped, and he came home to discover that someone else had been living his life for the past 2 decades. The man Springfield has known as Seymour Skinner is revealed to be an imposter. His real name is Armin Tamzarian. Before Vietnam, Tamzarian was a street punk, a petty criminal, a kid from the wrong side of the tracks with no future and no prospects. He was drafted into the army, served in the same unit as the real Skinner, and when Skinner was captured and presumed killed, Tamzarian felt guilty. He traveled to Springfield to deliver the news of Skinner's death to his mother, Agnes. But when he arrived, Agnes assumed he was her son. She needed him to be her son. And Tamzarian, who had never been wanted by anyone, who had never had a family or a home or an identity worth keeping, just went along with it. He became Seymour Skinner. He took his name, his rank, his life, his mother, and he lived inside that stolen identity for 20 years until the real Skinner walked through the door and the whole charade collapsed. Now here's where Springfield does something extraordinary. The town holds a meeting. The real Seymour Skinner is present. Armin Tamzarian is present. The truth is fully exposed. Everyone in Springfield knows that their principal is a fraud, that the man who has been running their school, raising his mother's children, participating in their community for 2 decades is not who he says he is. And the town votes, not on whether to prosecute Tamzarian, not on whether to restore the real Skinner's identity. They vote on whether to acknowledge the truth at all, and the verdict is unanimous. They vote to keep the lie. Judge Snyder issues a legal decree that the imposter is the real Skinner. The actual Seymour Skinner, the real one, the war hero who survived a POW camp and came home to find his life stolen, is tied to a railroad car and physically removed from Springfield, and the judge makes it explicitly illegal to ever mention the truth again, under penalty of torture. Let that settle for a moment. A town collectively decided that the truth was less important than their comfort. They had definitive proof that a major public figure in their community had been living a stolen identity for 2 decades. They had the actual person whose identity was stolen standing right in front of them, and they chose the fake. They chose the lie. They sentenced the truth to exile and made it a crime to speak its name. Fans hated this episode. The criticism was fierce. Harry Shearer, who voices both Skinner and Burns, publicly stated his displeasure with the storyline. Critics argued that the episode destroyed Skinner's character by revealing that everything we knew about him was based on a fiction. His military service, his relationship with his mother, his dynamic with Bart, his entire personality, all built on a lie. The episode is consistently ranked among the worst in the series. It's been called the point where The Simpsons stopped caring about its own continuity. But here's the thing nobody wants to acknowledge. The episode is completely honest about what Springfield is. It just says the quiet part out loud. Springfield has always operated this way. The town has always chosen comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths. The town has always agreed to forget whatever doesn't fit the narrative. The only difference is that this episode showed you the mechanism. It showed you the vote. It showed you the legal decree. It showed you the literal expulsion of truth from the community. Every other time Springfield forgets a catastrophe, ignores a contradiction, or resets to normal after something world-changing happens, it happens off-screen. The Principal and the Pauper is the one time the show let you watch it happen in real time. Consider how many times Springfield has experienced events that should permanently alter the town's reality. The town has been destroyed and rebuilt multiple times. It's been invaded. It's been sealed under a dome by the federal government. It's survived nuclear near misses, environmental catastrophes, alien encounters, and the literal blocking of the sun. And every single time, by the next episode, everything is back to normal. Nobody remembers. Nobody references the previous disaster. The slate is wiped clean. Fans call this episodic storytelling. The coma theory calls it a dreaming brain resetting between cycles. The radiation theory calls it cognitive damage from chronic exposure. But the Principal and the Pauper offers a fourth explanation. Springfield resets because the town chooses to reset. Collectively, deliberately, through an unspoken social contract that says, we will not acknowledge what happened. We will maintain the agreed-upon version of reality. We will treat the lie as truth and the truth as criminal, and anyone who breaks this contract will be removed from the community. That's not a cartoon trope. That's how real communities work. Small towns in particular have a terrifying capacity for collective denial. Scandals get buried, crimes get forgotten, uncomfortable truths get rewritten until the official version is the only version anyone remembers. The Principal and the Pauper didn't break The Simpsons, it diagnosed Springfield. It showed you that the town's amnesia isn't a glitch, it's a feature. It's a defense mechanism employed by a population that can't afford to confront the reality of their situation because confronting it would mean admitting that their principal is a fraud. Their power plant is poisoning them, their billionaire employer has been alive for over a century, and their children have been yellow since birth, and nobody thought to ask why. Springfield doesn't forget because its residents are stupid. Springfield forgets because remembering is too dangerous. If they remembered the dome, they'd have to acknowledge the pollution. If they acknowledged the pollution, they'd have to confront the power plant. If they confronted the power plant, they'd have to challenge Burns. If they challenged Burns, the economy would collapse. If the economy collapsed, the town would die. So they forget. They vote to forget. They make it illegal to remember. And anyone who remembers too much, anyone who insists on the truth, gets tied to a train and expelled from the community. The real Seymour Skinner was Springfield's canary in the coal mine. He was a man who showed up with proof that the official narrative was a lie, and the town's response wasn't to thank him for the truth. It was to criminalize the truth and exile the messenger. That's not a comedy beat. That's the show telling you exactly how Springfield maintains its impossible reality. Through consensus, through denial, through the systematic destruction of anyone who threatens the agreed-upon version of events. And if the coma theory is true, this episode takes on an even darker meaning. If everything since season 4 is Homer's dream, then Homer's unconscious mind invented a scenario where an entire town votes to sustain a lie because that's what Homer needs to believe. He needs to believe that lies can be maintained forever. He needs to believe that stolen identities can become real through collective agreement. He needs to believe that the fake version of a life can replace the real one and nobody will ever call it out. Because that's what Homer's coma is. A fake life replacing a real one. A dream masquerading as reality. And as long as nobody questions it, as long as the dream town of Springfield keeps voting to maintain the fiction, Homer never has to wake up. The Principal and the Pauper isn't the worst episode of The Simpsons. It's the most important one, because it's the only episode that shows you the infrastructure of Springfield's denial, the machinery that makes every reset possible, the social contract that allows a town of mutants to pretend they're normal, a man in a coma to pretend he's awake, and a community built on lies to punish anyone who speaks the truth. Armin Tamzarian is still pretending to be Seymour Skinner. Springfield is still pretending everything is fine. And the real Seymour Skinner is still somewhere out there, tied to a train, exiled from his own life, the last honest man in a town that made honesty illegal. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the quietest member of the Simpson family, and possibly the most dangerous person in all of Springfield. Maggie Simpson doesn't talk. She doesn't walk reliably. She communicates primarily through pacifier noises and the occasional pointed stare. She is 1 year old. She has been 1 year old for 36 years. And in that time, without saying a word, she has accomplished more than every other member of her family combined. She shot a billionaire. She led a daycare rebellion against a tyrannical caretaker. She saved her family from multiple life-threatening situations. She demonstrated problem-solving abilities that exceed those of adults 3 times her age. She was tested and found to possess intelligence that shouldn't exist in a child who hasn't learned to form sentences yet. And through all of it, every remarkable thing she has ever done, she maintains her silence. Not because she can't speak, because she chooses not to. Let's start with the shooting, because it's the act that defines her in the public consciousness, but is actually the least interesting thing about her. We've already discussed the Who Shot Mr. Burns mystery. We've examined the evidence. We've explored the alternate theories. But whether or not Maggie intentionally pulled that trigger, the aftermath is what matters. A baby was identified as the person who shot the richest man in town. The police investigated, the evidence was examined, and the official conclusion was yes, this infant committed an act of violence against a grown man and there's nothing anyone can do about it. Chief Wiggum's exact words are that no jury in the world would convict a baby. And that was the end of it. But look at the final shot of that episode one more time. Everyone has left the room. Maggie is alone. She looks around carefully, deliberately, confirming that nobody is watching. And then she moves her pacifier in a motion that mimics pulling a trigger. That's not reflexive behavior. That's not a baby randomly moving her mouth. That's a 1-year-old child demonstrating awareness of what happened, awareness that the act she committed had significance, and awareness that performing this gesture in front of others would have consequences. She waited until she was alone. She checked her surroundings. Then she reenacted the shooting in private. That sequence of actions requires situational awareness, memory, caution, and impulse control. Those are not traits associated with infants. Those are traits associated with someone who understands exactly what they're doing and has decided that secrecy is the optimal strategy. Now let's look at The Longest Daycare. This is a theatrical short film released in 2012, screened in cinemas before Ice Age Continental Drift. It was nominated for an Academy Award. And it is 7 minutes of Maggie Simpson demonstrating intelligence that would be remarkable in an adult, let alone a baby who can't walk without falling over. The premise is simple. Maggie is dropped off at the Ayn Rand School for Tots, a daycare center run with authoritarian efficiency. Inside the facility, Maggie encounters a caterpillar about to become a butterfly. She wants to protect it. Another baby, a bully named Gerald, wants to destroy it. What follows is a miniature action film in which Maggie outmaneuvers the bully, the daycare staff, and the facility's security systems to save the butterfly and release it into the wild. She does this without speaking a word. She does it through observation, planning, improvisation, and the kind of adaptive problem-solving that most adults struggle with. She reads the environment, she identifies threats, she develops strategies on the fly. She executes multi-step plans that require timing, spatial awareness, and the ability to predict other people's behavior. And she does all of this while being physically limited to the motor skills of a 1-year-old. Her body can barely keep up with her mind. She falls, she stumbles, she crawls when she should be running, but her decision-making is flawless. Every choice she makes is correct. Every move she makes is optimized. She is operating at a cognitive level that her physical development cannot support. And she succeeds anyway because her intelligence compensates for every limitation her body imposes. The show has tested Maggie's intelligence directly. The results vary depending on the episode, but the implication is consistent. Maggie is not a normal baby. In certain episodes, her intelligence registers as extraordinary, off the charts, beyond what standardized testing can measure. The show plays this for quick laughs and moves on. But the pattern is unmistakable. Maggie consistently demonstrates cognitive abilities that no 1-year-old should possess. And the family consistently fails to notice because they're too busy dealing with Homer's disasters and Bart's pranks and Lisa's crusades to pay attention to the baby who's been quietly solving problems in the background. And that's the key. Quietly. Maggie's defining characteristic isn't her intelligence, it's her silence. Her first word, Daddy, was voiced by Elizabeth Taylor in what amounted to a cameo appearance. It happened once and was never repeated. Maggie has gone 36 years without developing language in any meaningful way. She communicates through gestures, facial expressions, and the occasional sound effect. She is surrounded by a family of extremely verbal people. Homer never stops talking. Marge never stops worrying out loud. Bart never stops provoking. Lisa never stops lecturing. The Simpson household is a wall of constant noise, and in the middle of it, Maggie sits in silence, watching, listening, processing. The theory is that Maggie's silence is not developmental delay. It is a conscious, strategic decision made by a mind intelligent enough to recognize the value of not being noticed. Look at what happens to the intelligent women in this family. Lisa Simpson is brilliant. Lisa is a genius. Lisa has an IQ that dwarfs everyone in her household and most of the adults in Springfield. And what has that intelligence gotten her? Isolation, mockery, dismissal. Lisa speaks up and gets ignored. Lisa challenges authority and gets punished. Lisa tries to improve the world around her and gets crushed by the weight of a community that doesn't want to be improved. Lisa's intelligence is her greatest gift and her greatest curse because she uses it visibly. She wears it on the outside. She announces herself as the smartest person in the room, and the room responds by making sure she knows how little that matters. Maggie watched this happen. Maggie has been watching this happen since the day she was born. She watched her sister fight every day for recognition and receive nothing but resistance. She watched the smartest person in the family be consistently overlooked, undervalued, and dismissed by a household and a community that reward stupidity and punish insight. And Maggie learned, not the lesson Lisa learned, which is to keep fighting regardless of the cost. Maggie learned the opposite lesson. Silence is power. Invisibility is armor. The less they notice you, the more you can accomplish. Think about it. Every time Maggie does something remarkable, what happens? The family doesn't notice. The community doesn't notice. Burns was shot, and the investigation focused on everyone except the baby because who suspects a baby? The daycare rebellion succeeded because nobody monitors infants closely enough to see them organizing. Every heroic act, every display of intelligence, every moment where Maggie saves the day, it happens below the radar, in the margins, in the spaces where nobody is paying attention. And Maggie has ensured that nobody pays attention to her by maintaining the most effective disguise possible. She pretends to be exactly what everyone expects a baby to be: quiet, passive, helpless, dependent. She's none of those things. She's the opposite of all of them. She's the most capable member of the Simpson family, and she has spent 36 years making sure nobody figures that out. Now connect this to the radiation theory. If Springfield's contaminated environment creates mutations, and if those mutations affect each person differently, then Maggie represents the opposite extreme from Homer. Homer's mutation reduced his intelligence to clinical disability. Maggie's mutation supercharged hers to levels that can't be properly measured. Same environmental cause, same family, same contaminated water and irradiated air. But where the father's brain was diminished, the daughter's was amplified. Homer and Maggie are two sides of the same radioactive coin. He is what happens when mutation takes something away. She is what happens when mutation gives something extraordinary. And if the coma theory is true, Maggie's genius takes on an almost unbearable poignancy. If Homer is dreaming, if every episode is the product of an unconscious mind trying to hold onto his family, then Maggie's brilliance is Homer's deepest hope for his youngest child projected onto the dream. He can't see her grow up. He can't watch her develop. He can't hear her speak or see her walk or learn what kind of person she becomes. So in the dream, he makes her extraordinary. He gives her an intelligence that transcends her age. He makes her capable of things no baby could actually do because in his coma, Homer needs to believe that Maggie will be okay even without him there to protect her. Her genius isn't a mutation, it's a father's prayer. But back in Springfield, in the waking world, if there still is a waking world, there's another reading, a darker one. Maggie doesn't speak because she's learned that speaking gets you nothing in this town. She doesn't reveal her intelligence because intelligence is punished in Springfield. She watches everything. She remembers everything. She understands everything. And she waits. For what? The show never tells us. Maggie's endgame is the last truly unsolved mystery of the Simpson family. She's the only character whose future remains completely unknown because the show has never definitively revealed what she's capable of. But we've seen glimpses. We've seen her shoot a man. We've seen her command a room full of babies. We've seen her solve problems that stump adults. We've seen her confirm or deny a person's innocence with a single nod, and the family trusts her judgment implicitly. Maggie Simpson is 1 year old. She cannot walk without falling. She cannot speak beyond a few sounds, and she is the most powerful person on Evergreen Terrace. She just hasn't decided what to do about it yet. And maybe that's the scariest thing about Maggie. Not what she's done, but what she's waiting to do. Behind that pacifier, behind those enormous eyes, behind 36 years of deliberate silence, something is thinking, something is planning, something is watching the family and the town and the world with an intelligence that nobody suspects and nobody can contain. And when Maggie finally decides to act, when she finally breaks her silence and reveals what she's been carrying behind that blank baby stare, Springfield won't see it coming. Nobody will, because that's exactly how Maggie designed it. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the phenomenon that has made The Simpsons more famous in the 2020s than it was during its actual golden age. The predictions. The idea that a cartoon sitcom from 1989 has been accurately forecasting world events for over 3 decades. And the truth behind this phenomenon is more interesting than any conspiracy theory could ever be. Let's get the big ones out of the way first because you've probably seen them shared 1,000 times on social media. In the year 2000, the episode Bart to the Future depicted a future in which Lisa Simpson becomes the first female president of the United States. In that same episode, Lisa's predecessor in the Oval Office is identified as Donald Trump. The episode aired 16 years before Trump won the 2016 election. 16 years. The show depicted a Trump presidency as a joke about the absurd direction America was heading, and then America headed exactly in that direction. The internet lost its collective mind. Screenshots from the episode went viral. The Simpsons predicted Trump became a meme that transcended the show's actual fan base and entered mainstream consciousness. People who hadn't watched The Simpsons in 20 years were suddenly sharing clips and asking how did they know. And that's just the headline. The list goes on and on. In a 1995 episode, the show depicted a device that looks remarkably similar to a modern smartwatch. In a 1994 episode, Homer goes to space with Buzz Aldrin, decades before commercial space tourism became a reality. In a 1998 episode, Homer discovers a mathematical equation that appears to predict the mass of the Higgs boson particle, which wouldn't be experimentally confirmed until 2012. In a 1999 episode, Homer proposes a theory about the universe being shaped like a donut. And years later, cosmologists found radiation patterns suggesting the universe might actually be torus-shaped. In a 1993 episode called Margin Chains, a flu virus originating from Asia spreads to Springfield, causing mass panic, panic buying, and a frantic search for a cure. The episode aired 27 years before COVID-19. And during the chaos of that fictional outbreak, the townspeople accidentally release a swarm of killer bees, which felt bizarrely prophetic when Asian giant hornets, dubbed murder hornets by the media, showed up in the United States during the actual 2020 pandemic. In 1996, the episode Homer Palooza featured a joke where the hip-hop group Cypress Hill accidentally books the London Symphony Orchestra while under the influence. That exact collaboration actually happened in 2024 when Cypress Hill performed with the London Symphony Orchestra at the Royal Albert Hall. 28 years between the joke and the reality. In a 1998 episode, the show depicted Disney acquiring 20th Century Fox, which actually happened in 2019. In multiple episodes across the series, the show depicted video calling technology, autocorrect failures, and surveillance culture years before those technologies became part of everyday life. The list is long enough to fill its own video, and every time a new prediction appears to come true, the internet responds with the same mixture of amazement and suspicion. How are they doing this? Are the writers time travelers? Is there a conspiracy? Is The Simpsons some kind of prophetic text hidden inside a cartoon wrapper? The answer, according to the people who actually make the show, is much simpler and much less satisfying. Al Jean, who has been an executive producer on The Simpsons since its earliest seasons, has addressed the prediction phenomenon directly. His explanation is blunt, if you throw enough darts, you're going to get some bullseyes. That's it. That's his answer. The Simpsons has produced nearly 800 episodes over 36 years. Each episode contains dozens of jokes, references, and satirical observations about American culture, technology, politics, and society. When you generate that much content over that long a period, some of it is going to line up with future events through sheer statistical probability. Producer Bill Oakley, who ran the show during several of its peak seasons, put it even more plainly. There are very few cases where The Simpsons predicted something. It's mainly just coincidence because the episodes are so old that history repeats itself. That's the official position from inside the show. Coincidence, volume. And the cyclical nature of history. Fact-checking organizations like Snopes have systematically debunked many of the most popular claim predictions, explaining that the show's enormous output creates a lot of opportunities for coincidences to appear, and that most of these predictions have rather simple and mundane explanations. Many of the supposed predictions are actually based on trends that were already visible when the episodes were written. The writers didn't predict Trump's presidency. They observed that Trump had been publicly flirting with running for office since the late 1980s and wrote a joke about the logical extreme of celebrity politics. They didn't predict the Disney-Fox merger. They observed that media consolidation was an accelerating trend and wrote a gag about a mega corporation swallowing its competitors. They didn't predict smartwatches. They observed that technology was getting smaller and more personal and imagined what a wrist-mounted computer might look like. The Simpsons writing staff has historically been one of the most educated in television. Multiple writers hold degrees from Harvard, Yale, and other elite institutions. Many have backgrounds in mathematics, science, computer science, and political theory. These aren't people pulling random guesses out of thin air. They're intelligent, well-read observers of American culture who spend their careers studying trends, analyzing patterns, and extrapolating current trajectories to their absurd but logical conclusions. They're not predicting the future, they're reading the present more carefully than most people do, and then pushing it forward a few steps. But here's where it gets genuinely strange. Because while the debunking explains most of the predictions, it doesn't explain all of them. Some of the coincidences are so specific, so precise, so eerily detailed that statistical probability starts to feel inadequate as an explanation. The Trump prediction didn't just forecast that a celebrity might run for president, it specified Trump by name. The episode showed him descending an escalator in a sequence that visually mirrors the announcement Trump made in 2015. The Siegfried and Roy episode didn't just joke about exotic animals being dangerous. It depicted a white tiger attacking one of the performers, which is almost exactly what happened in 2003 when Roy Horn was critically injured by one of the act's white tigers. These aren't vague trend extrapolations. These are specific details that align with future events in ways that make you sit back and stare at the screen. And this is where the meta theory comes in, the one that's more interesting than any conspiracy about time travel or prophetic writing staffs. The Simpsons doesn't predict the future. The Simpsons shapes the future, not through magic, not through prophecy, through cultural influence. The Simpsons is one of the most watched, most quoted, most referenced, and most deeply embedded pieces of American media in history. It has been running for longer than most of its current audience has been alive. Its jokes have become part of the American lexicon. Its observations have become part of how Americans understand their own culture. When The Simpsons makes a joke about Trump becoming president, that joke enters the cultural bloodstream. Millions of people see it. It becomes a reference point. It becomes something people say at parties and share on social media and think about when they see Trump on the news. The joke doesn't predict the future. The joke makes the future feel familiar. It primes the cultural imagination. It makes the idea of a Trump presidency feel less like a shocking impossibility and more like an inevitable punchline. And when the punchline arrives, when reality catches up to the joke, it doesn't feel like prediction. It feels like recognition. We've seen this before. The Simpsons already did this. The show didn't predict Disney buying Fox. The show made media consolidation feel inevitable by depicting it as obvious satire. When Disney actually bought Fox, the cultural response wasn't shock. It was, of course they did. The Simpsons already told us this would happen. The show's satire doesn't forecast the future. It normalizes the future. It takes trends that are already in motion and presents them as accomplished facts. And when those facts eventually materialize, the audience experiences a sense of déjà vu that feels like prophecy, but is actually the result of having been culturally prepared for the outcome years in advance. Springfield doesn't reflect America. America has become Springfield. The show held up a mirror for 36 years, and we stared into it so long that we started to resemble what we saw: the nuclear power plant, the corrupt billionaire, the incompetent government. The population too distracted to notice how badly they're being exploited. The endless cycle of catastrophe and reset. The collective amnesia that lets the same mistakes happen over and over. Springfield isn't a prediction of where America was headed. Springfield is a diagnosis of where America already was. The show just wrote it down first. And here's the final piece that makes the prediction phenomenon genuinely unsettling. The Simpsons has also made jokes that haven't come true, thousands of them, jokes about jetpacks and moon colonies and technology that never materialized, jokes about political outcomes that went the other way, jokes about cultural shifts that never happened. Nobody screenshots those. Nobody shares them on social media. Nobody builds conspiracy theories around the predictions that failed, because confirmation bias only works in one direction. We remember the hits and forget the misses. And when you produce 788 episodes containing thousands of satirical observations about the trajectory of American culture, and then you filter those observations through confirmation bias so that only the accurate ones get remembered and shared, you end up with a highlight reel that looks like prophecy. The predictions aren't supernatural, they're not conspiratorial. They're the natural result of a brilliantly written show running for an impossibly long time, staffed by highly educated observers of American culture, producing more satirical content than any other show in television history, and then having that content filtered through the most powerful confirmation bias engine ever created, which is the internet. The Simpsons didn't predict the future. The Simpsons wrote so many possible futures that some of them were bound to come true. And the ones that came true are the only ones anyone remembers. But try telling that to the internet the next time a Simpsons clip from 1997 lines up perfectly with a headline from 2025. Because the truth is, even knowing how the trick works, it's still impressive to watch. 800 episodes, 36 years, thousands of satirical observations, and enough bullseyes to make even the show's own creators pause and wonder if maybe, just maybe, they know something they shouldn't. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the woman who explains everything about Homer Simpson, not Marge, not the mother who stayed, the mother who left. Mona Simpson, the most important character in the history of The Simpsons who barely appears in the show at all. And the conspiracy that connects her disappearance to Mr. Burns, to Homer's stupidity, to the power plant, and to the fundamental brokenness of the Simpson family across 3 generations. For the first 6 seasons of The Simpsons, Homer's mother was dead. That was the official story. Abe Simpson, Homer's father, told him his mother had passed away when Homer was young. He showed Homer a grave. Homer mourned. He grew up believing he was a boy whose mother died and whose father was too cold and distant to fill the void she left behind. That belief shaped everything about Homer, his desperate need for love, his clinginess toward Marge, his terror of abandonment, his compulsive need to be liked by everyone around him, his willingness to endure humiliation, degradation, and abuse from his employer rather than risk losing the one stable thing in his life, which is his family. Homer Simpson's entire personality is a coping mechanism for maternal loss. And in season 7, the show revealed that the loss was a lie. The episode is called Mother Simpson. It aired on November 19th, 1995. And it is widely considered one of the greatest episodes in the history of the series. Here's what happens. Homer fakes his own death to get out of working on a Saturday. He pushes a dummy off a cliff near the power plant and the town believes he's dead. When Marge insists he go to the Hall of Records and correct the error, Homer discovers something that changes his life. According to municipal records, his mother is alive. She never died. The grave Abe showed him wasn't hers. It was the grave of Walt Whitman, the poet. Abe had been passing off a famous writer's headstone as his wife's burial site for Homer's entire life. Homer finds Mona at a cemetery, visiting what she believes is her son's grave. She doesn't recognize him at first. He's changed. He's grown. He's become the person he became in her absence. But when Homer proves who he is, they have a reunion that is one of the most genuinely emotional scenes the show has ever produced. A grown man and his mother, separated for 27 years, finding each other beside a headstone that belongs to neither of them. And then Mona tells him the truth. She didn't die. She didn't leave because she stopped loving him. She left because she had to, because staying would have put Homer and Abe in danger, because the man who owned the power plant, the man Homer would grow up to work for without ever knowing the connection, had destroyed her life and forced her underground. The story goes back to 1969. Mona Simpson was a housewife. She was married to Abe. She had a young son named Homer. She was ordinary, unremarkable, living a quiet life in Springfield while the world outside was burning through the civil rights movement, the counterculture, the protests against Vietnam. And then something changed. The show depicts it with characteristic absurdity, but genuine emotional weight. Mona was radicalized. She joined a group of activists, hippies the show calls them, but the show also makes clear that their cause was legitimate. They targeted a biological weapons laboratory owned by Mr. Burns. Let that sink in. Mr. Burns didn't just own a nuclear power plant. He owned a germ warfare facility, a laboratory designed to produce biological weapons in Springfield, the same town where he had later built a nuclear reactor with 342 safety violations. Burns was manufacturing weapons-grade pathogens in the same community where Homer Simpson was growing up, where children were playing, where families were living their lives without any idea that the richest man in town was cooking up diseases in a lab down the road. Mona and her group broke into the lab. They detonated what the show describes as an antibiotic bomb, destroying the biological agent stored inside. During the raid, they accidentally cured the asthma of the facility's security guard, who happened to be Clancy Wiggum, the man who would later become Springfield's chief of police. The raid was successful. The germs were destroyed. But Mona made one mistake. As the group fled, she stopped to help someone who had been knocked down in the chaos. That someone was Mr. Burns. She stopped to help the man whose weapons she had just destroyed. And Burns saw her face. He identified her. He reported her to the FBI. And from that moment forward, Mona Simpson was a fugitive. She couldn't go home. She couldn't contact her family. She couldn't hold her son or explain to him why she was leaving. She kissed Homer goodbye while he was sleeping and disappeared into the night. For 27 years, Homer woke up and his mother was gone. Abe told him she was dead. And Homer spent the next 3 decades of his life believing he was unloved, believing he was the kind of son a mother would rather die than raise, believing that there was something fundamentally wrong with him that made people leave. Now here's where the conspiracy takes shape. Burns didn't just identify Mona to the FBI. He pursued her, actively, for decades. Burns held a personal grudge against a woman who destroyed his weapons lab, and he used his resources, his connections, and his influence to ensure she could never return to her family. When Mona finally comes back to Springfield in season 7, Burns recognizes her almost immediately. He spots her through a cab window and calls the authorities. The FBI shows up at the Simpson house. Mona has to flee again. Homer has to say goodbye to his mother for the second time. And this time, he knows why she left. He knows who forced her out. And he knows that the man responsible is his own employer. Homer works for Burns. Homer has worked for Burns his entire adult life. Homer earns his paycheck from the man who destroyed his family. And Homer doesn't connect the dots. He doesn't confront Burns. He doesn't quit. He doesn't even seem to fully process the connection between the billionaire who signs his checks and the billionaire who stole his mother. Homer's inability to make this connection isn't played as a joke. It's played as tragedy. Because Homer Simpson is not capable of making connections like that. His brain doesn't work that way. The crayon, the radiation, the decades of cognitive erosion from living in Springfield's contaminated environment. Homer is too damaged to understand the architecture of his own suffering. And that's the conspiracy. Burns didn't just ruin Mona's life, he engineered Homer's. By driving Mona away when Homer was a child, Burns ensured that Homer would grow up emotionally damaged, desperate for approval, incapable of challenging authority, terrified of abandonment, the perfect employee, a man who would work at a dangerous facility for decades without complaint because the alternative, being alone, being unloved, being abandoned again, was worse than any job. Homer doesn't work at the power plant because he's too stupid to find better employment. Homer works at the power plant because Burns broke him as a child, and the broken version of Homer is exactly the kind of worker Burns needs. Compliant, obedient, grateful for any scrap of attention, incapable of resistance. The show confirms this connection in a later season when it's revealed that Burns and Grandpa Simpson struck a deal. Burns had committed a crime and Grandpa discovered it. In exchange for Grandpa's silence, Burns guaranteed that Homer would have a job at the plant no matter what. No matter how many mistakes he made, no matter how incompetent he was, no matter how many times he should have been fired. 742 documented errors, and Homer was never permanently let go, because the deal protected him. Homer's job security wasn't a cartoon convenience. It was a contractual obligation between his father and his mother's persecutor, brokered in silence, maintained in secret, and never explained to Homer because explaining it would mean explaining everything else. Homer's mother was a radical who fought against a billionaire's biological weapons program. That billionaire retaliated by destroying her family. Her husband covered up the truth and struck a deal with the enemy. Her son grew up believing he was worthless, became cognitively impaired through a combination of environmental poisoning and physical brain damage, and spent his entire adult life working for the man who took his mother away from him. 3 generations of Simpsons broken by one man's grudge, and Homer stands at the center of it, too damaged to see the pattern, too dependent to break free, strangling his son on the couch every evening in a house that runs on electricity generated by the same power plant that poisons his water and funds the empire of the man who stole his childhood. Burns didn't just take Homer's mother, he took Homer's potential. The show proved this in Homer without the crayon. Homer is brilliant, articulate, capable, aware. The man Homer could have been, the man he would have been if his mother had stayed, if Burns hadn't intervened, if the system hadn't conspired to keep him small and stupid and compliant. That man exists inside Homer's skull, trapped behind a crayon and a lifetime of radiation damage. Homer chose to put the crayon back because being smart in Springfield was unbearable, but the choice was rigged from the start. Homer was never meant to be smart in Springfield. Burns made sure of that when Homer was 6 years old and his mother vanished in the night. Mona Simpson died in a later season. Her death scene is one of the show's most quietly devastating moments. Homer sits beside her, he holds her hand, and he watches the mother he barely knew slip away for the last time. No joke, no cutaway gag, no reset. Just a man and his mother and the weight of 27 stolen years pressing down on both of them. The Simpsons is a comedy. It has always been a comedy. But underneath the jokes, underneath the gags, underneath 36 seasons of Homer falling down and getting back up, there is a story about a family that was systematically destroyed by one man's power and one town's inability to resist it. Mona fought back and lost everything. Abe made a deal with the devil and buried the truth. Homer inherited the consequences and never understood why his life felt so heavy. And Burns won. Burns always wins. Because in Springfield, the man with the money writes the rules, and the rules say Homer Simpson will work at the power plant until he dies. Because his grandfather made a deal, because his mother made a choice, because the richest man in town needed a broken man in Sector 7G. And Homer was broken before he ever clocked in. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to a mystery that the show's own creator tried to solve and then immediately unsolved. Where is Springfield? Not which state is it in? That question has been asked and dodged 1,000 times. The real question is deeper than geography. The real question is why the show has spent 36 years making it impossible to answer. Springfield is the most famous fictional town in American history. More people can name Springfield than can name the capital of half the states in the actual country. It has a nuclear power plant, a tire fire, a gorge, a butte, a harbor, a monorail, an elementary school, a prison, 2 hospitals, and a quickie mart. It has mountains and oceans and deserts and farmland and forests. It borders the states of Ohio, Nevada, Maine, and Kentucky, depending on which episode you're watching. It is located on the coast and also in the heartland, and also near the Canadian border, and also near Mexico. It has weather that ranges from blizzard to tropical heat waves within the span of a single season. Springfield does not exist in any state because Springfield exists in all of them simultaneously. The show has been deliberately contradicting itself about Springfield's location for its entire run. Every time a clue appears that seems to narrow down the possibilities, another clue appears in a different episode that contradicts it entirely. In one episode, Springfield is in the north. In another, it's in the south. Lisa's area code starts with 636, which is a Missouri code. The state abbreviation has been shown as NT, which isn't a real state. When Homer calls the state capital, the voice on the other end identifies the state as being one that starts with a vowel, but that narrows the field by eliminating some options while keeping dozens of others viable. The show teases answers and then snatches them away over and over for 3.5 decades. Matt Groening, the show's creator, named the town after Springfield, Oregon. He has admitted this. In a 2012 interview with Smithsonian Magazine, he said he chose the name Springfield because it's one of the most common city names in America, and because he grew up near Springfield, Oregon. For approximately 48 hours, the mystery was solved. Springfield was in Oregon, case closed. Except the show immediately continued contradicting this revelation. Episodes aired after the interview that placed Springfield in geographic contexts inconsistent with Oregon. The writers didn't honor Groening's confession. They kept the mystery alive because the mystery was the point. And the mystery works because Springfield's geographic impossibility isn't a bug. It's the show's most sophisticated joke. Springfield has oceanfront property and mountain ranges and deserts and active volcanoes all within driving distance. No real American town has that combination of geographic features. The town is an architectural Frankenstein, stitched together from pieces of every American community that has ever existed. It has the industrial decay of the Rust Belt. It has the suburban sprawl of the Sun Belt. It has the small-town insularity of New England and the cultural blankness of the Midwest. It's everywhere and nowhere. It's the town you grew up in, no matter where you grew up. That's the surface-level explanation. Springfield is universal. Springfield is every town. Springfield is designed to feel familiar to every viewer, regardless of their actual zip code. This is true. This is the intentional design philosophy. Groening has confirmed it. The writers have confirmed it. The show is meant to resonate with the broadest possible American audience by being set in a place that could be anywhere. But under the lens of the theories we've been discussing, Springfield's geographic impossibility takes on a more sinister dimension. If the radiation theory is true, if Springfield is a contaminated zone where the laws of biology have been warped by decades of nuclear exposure, why should geography be exempt? If the people of Springfield can have 4 fingers and yellow skin and survive injuries that would kill normal humans, why should the town itself obey the normal rules of American geography? Maybe Springfield has both mountains and oceans because the contamination doesn't just affect biology. Maybe it affects the physical landscape. Maybe the radiation has warped the space around Springfield, compressing geographic features that should be hundreds of miles apart into a single, impossible region. If the coma theory is true, Springfield's geography makes even more sense. Homer's dreaming brain doesn't have a precise map of America in its memory banks. It has impressions, it has feelings. It has fragments of every place Homer has ever visited or seen on television. Mountains from a vacation, oceans from a commercial, deserts from a movie, farmland from driving through the Midwest. Homer's unconscious mind assembled Springfield from every American landscape he ever encountered, layering them on top of each other without regard for geographic logic, because dreams don't have geographic logic. Dreams have emotional logic. And Springfield feels like America because it's made from Homer's memory of America, which is scattered and incomplete and held together by longing rather than cartography. And if the principle and the pauper theory is true, if Springfield operates through collective denial and the systematic suppression of inconvenient truths, then the town's refusal to have a fixed location is the ultimate expression of that denial. You can't investigate a town you can't find. You can't bring federal charges against a nuclear power plant if the state it's located in keeps changing. You can't hold anyone accountable for anything if the jurisdiction is perpetually undefined. Springfield's geographic uncertainty isn't just a comedy device. It's a legal shield. A town with no fixed location has no fixed regulatory authority, no consistent EPA oversight, no permanent state attorney general to investigate its nuclear facility. Springfield floats between states because floating is safer than landing. Landing means accountability. Landing means someone shows up with a map and a badge and starts asking questions about the three-eyed fish and the cracked cooling towers and the billionaire who remembers the Spanish-American War. In the episode Behind the Laughter, the show's 12th season mockumentary about the Simpsons family, Springfield's location is finally revealed. Sort of. In the original broadcast, the family is said to be from northern Kentucky, but in syndicated reruns, the location was changed to a different state entirely. The answer literally depends on which version of the episode you're watching. The show gave you the truth and then changed the truth depending on the platform. Even when Springfield has a definitive answer, that answer isn't definitive. It shifts, it mutates, it refuses to stay pinned down, just like everything else in this town. Every state in the Union has been theorized as Springfield's home at some point. Every theory has evidence supporting it and evidence disproving it. The show has deliberately created this state of permanent ambiguity, and it has maintained that ambiguity for longer than most viewers have been alive. Springfield will never be located, not because the show can't decide, because the show decided long ago that Springfield is more useful as a mystery than as an answer. A town that could be anywhere is a town that belongs to everyone, and a town that belongs to everyone is a town nobody can shut down. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the final mystery, the one that ties every single theory in this video together, the one that sits at the center of 36 seasons like a black hole, warping everything around it, the floating timeline, the fact that nobody in Springfield ages, and what that actually means when you stop treating it as a cartoon convention and start treating it as evidence. Bart Simpson was 10 years old when The Simpsons debuted in 1989. He is 10 years old right now. Lisa was 8 then, she is 8 now. Homer and Marge were roughly in their mid-30s. They still are. Maggie was 1 year old, she still is. 36 years have passed in the real world. 0 years have passed in Springfield. The characters exist in a permanent present tense, locked at the ages they were when the show began, living through decades of cultural change without adding a single candle to their birthday cakes. The industry term for this is a floating timeline. It means the show's present is always the viewer's present. When the episode airs in 2025, the characters are living in 2025. When it aired in 1995, they were living in 1995. The year changes, the technology changes, the references change, but the characters don't. They exist in a state of temporal suspension where everything around them evolves and they remain frozen. It's the standard approach for long-running animated shows. Most people accept it without question. But The Simpsons has been running long enough that the floating timeline has created contradictions so massive and so bizarre that they've started to crack the foundation of the show's reality. The most obvious problem is Homer and Marge's backstory. When the show began, their history was grounded in the late 1970s and early 1980s. They met in high school, they fell in love, They had Bart. Their courtship was set during a specific era, complete with era-appropriate music, fashion, and cultural references. Homer's hair, Marge's prom dress. The whole thing was anchored to a time period that made sense for parents in their mid-30s during the late 1980s. But as the floating timeline dragged the present forward, the backstory had to move with it. If Homer and Marge are still in their mid-30s in 2025, they didn't meet in 1980. They met in approximately 2005, which means their high school experience wasn't defined by Watergate and disco. It was defined by MySpace and early YouTube. The show has depicted this shift explicitly. In later flashback episodes, Homer and Marge's youth has been rewritten to include references to the 1990s, then the 2000s, then the 2010s. Their origin story has been told and retold at least 4 times, each version placing their formative years in a different decade. They were hippies, then they were grunge fans, then they were hipsters, then they were millennials. The characters are the same, the love story is the same, but the era keeps sliding forward because the timeline demands it. This means Homer and Marge don't have a fixed past. Their history is rewritten every few years to maintain the illusion of a permanent present. Their memories are unstable. Their origin story is a draft that keeps getting revised. And the show treats this as normal because within the logic of a floating timeline, it is normal. Characters don't have histories, they have approximations. They have whatever backstory is needed to make the current episode work. And when the next episode needs a different backstory, the old one gets discarded without ceremony. Now apply the theories. Every single theory we've discussed in this video converges on this point. Every one of them arrives at the same conclusion through a different path. The coma theory says nobody ages because they exist inside the frozen mind of an unconscious man. The radiation theory says nobody ages because their biology has been mutated by decades of nuclear contamination. The principle and the pauper theory says nobody ages because Springfield collectively agrees to ignore any truth that threatens the status quo, including the truth of time passing. The Burns immortality theory says at least one person in Springfield has found a way to cheat death through technology and wealth, which means the concept of aging is already negotiable in this universe. And the prediction theory says The Simpsons exists in a feedback loop with American culture, where the show and reality mirror each other so closely that the distinction between fiction and prophecy becomes meaningless. All of these theories are saying the same thing in different languages. Time doesn't work in Springfield. Not because Springfield is a cartoon, because something about Springfield, whether it's the radiation or the coma or the collective denial or the billionaire's medical technology or some combination of all 4, has broken the normal flow of time for everyone who lives there. The floating timeline isn't a production convenience, it's a symptom. It's the show telling you that these characters are trapped, locked in a loop, endlessly cycling through variations of the same lives without ever progressing, without ever growing, without ever reaching the conclusion that time should eventually deliver to every living thing. The show has imagined its characters aging. It's done it multiple times. In the season 6 episode Lisa's Wedding, the show flashes forward to show Lisa as a 23-year-old woman engaged to be married. The future it depicts is detailed, specific, and emotionally rich. Lisa has grown up. She's become the person the show has always suggested she'd become. Intelligent, principled, lonely, searching for connection in a world that doesn't quite understand her. The episode proves that The Simpsons can imagine its characters as adults. It can envision their futures. It can tell stories about who they'd become if time were allowed to pass. But it chooses not to. The flash forward is a single episode, a what if, a glimpse through a window that immediately closes. Lisa returns to being 8 years old. Bart returns to being 10. The future is locked away. And the permanent present resumes as if the glimpse never happened. The show can imagine growth. It refuses to allow it. And this is where the mystery becomes something larger than The Simpsons, because the floating timeline isn't just a narrative device. It's a statement about America. The Simpsons is the American family. They have been the American family for longer than any other fictional household in the history of the medium. And the American family, as The Simpsons depicts it, cannot be allowed to change. Homer must always be middle-aged. Marge must always be patient. Bart must always be rebellious. Lisa must always be idealistic. Maggie must always be silent. The dynamic must be preserved. The structure must hold. Because the moment the Simpson family ages, the moment Bart goes to college and Lisa moves away and Maggie starts talking and Homer retires and Marge is left in an empty house on Evergreen Terrace, the show isn't a comedy anymore. It's an elegy. It's the story of a family that ran out of time. And America doesn't want that story. America wants the version where the kids are always young and the parents are always together and the house always looks the same and the beer is always cold and the couch gag always plays and nobody ever has to say goodbye. The floating timeline is the show's thesis statement. The Simpsons are frozen in time because we need them to be, because they represent something we can't afford to let go of. The messy, chaotic, dysfunctional, loving, infuriating, indestructible American family. The family that survives everything, that recovers from everything, that resets after every disaster and starts fresh every Sunday night at 8 o'clock. The Simpsons don't age because aging means ending, and the American family isn't allowed to end. Not in television, not in our imagination, not in the dream of a comatose man in a hospital bed in a town that doesn't appear on any map. The loop isn't their prison, it's ours. We built it, we maintain it. We tune in every week to make sure the walls are still standing and the family is still intact and the timeline is still floating. And every time we watch, every time we laugh, every time we quote a line from an episode that aired before most of us were born, we tighten the loop a little more. We make it a little harder for the Simpsons to escape. Because if they escape, if the timeline stops floating and starts landing, if Bart turns 11 and Lisa turns 9 and Maggie finally says her second word, then the show ends. And the show ending means admitting that the version of America it represents, the chaotic, resilient, eternally optimistic version of the middle-class American family, was always temporary, was always fragile, was always one birthday away from dissolving into something we don't recognize anymore. The Simpsons are trapped in a loop because we trapped them there. And every theory in this video, every mystery, every buried storyline, every contradiction, every impossible thing that happens in Springfield and gets forgotten by the next episode, it all comes back to this. Time stopped in Springfield because we stopped it. We pressed pause in 1989 and we never pressed play. And now here we are, 36 years later, watching the same family in the same house, on the same street, in the same impossible town. Waiting for something to change, knowing nothing will, because we won't let it. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to two shorter mysteries that deserve attention before we wrap up. The first is a body count that the show has been quietly accumulating for over 3 decades. And the second is the darkest interpretation of the nicest man in Springfield. Let's start with Hans Moleman. If you've watched The Simpsons for any length of time, you know Hans Moleman. He's the tiny, elderly, nearly blind man who appears in the background of Springfield scenes and exists primarily to suffer. He gets hit by cars, he gets crushed by objects, he gets buried alive, he gets eaten by animals, he gets struck by lightning, he gets incinerated. He walks into traffic and disappears under wheels. He is, by conservative estimate, the most frequently killed character in the history of American animation. The show has killed Hans Moleman dozens of times. Not in Treehouse of Horror episodes, not in dream sequences, in regular, canonical episodes. Moleman dies, and then he appears in the next episode completely fine. No explanation, no resurrection scene. No acknowledgement that he was dead 2 episodes ago. He just shows up again, ready to be killed again in an endless cycle of death and return that the show treats as background noise. Most fans accept this as a running gag. Moleman dies a lot. It's funny. Don't think about it. But under the framework of the theories we've been discussing, Moleman's repeated deaths are deeply strange. If the radiation theory is true, Moleman could represent the most extreme mutation in Springfield. A man whose biology has been so fundamentally altered by nuclear exposure that his body can reconstitute itself after fatal trauma. He doesn't survive his deaths the way Homer survives injuries. Homer endures damage and heals. Moleman actually dies. His body ceases to function. And then he comes back, as if death in Springfield is a temporary condition for certain residents. A biological reset triggered by whatever the power plant has done to their cellular structure. If the coma theory is true, Moleman's repeated deaths serve a different function. He's a background process in Homer's dream, a filler character that Homer's unconscious mind doesn't care enough about to maintain consistently. Moleman dies because Homer's dreaming brain occasionally lets minor characters lapse, and he comes back because the dream needs him to populate the next scene. Moleman isn't a person in this reading. He's a prop, a piece of furniture that Homer's mind occasionally breaks and then reassembles because the dream requires a certain number of bodies to make Springfield feel populated. If the collective denial theory from the principal and the pauper is true, Moleman's deaths are just another thing Springfield has agreed not to notice. A man dies in public, repeatedly, visibly, in front of witnesses, and nobody investigates. Nobody calls for an ambulance. Nobody asks how he keeps coming back. The town has normalized Moleman's death cycle the way it has normalized everything else that should be alarming. Three-eyed fish, a billionaire who glows in the dark, a baby who shot a man, a principal who isn't who he says he is, and a tiny old man who dies every few weeks and keeps showing up for more. Moleman once stated his age as 31 years old. 31. Look at him. He appears to be in his 80s or 90s. If he's telling the truth, and there's no reason within the show to believe he's lying, then something aged him catastrophically. Something took a man in the prime of his life and turned him into a walking corpse decades before his time. Something that also made him nearly indestructible, despite his apparent frailty. Something that made death a revolving door instead of a permanent exit. The radiation theory has an answer for this. The coma theory has an answer for this. The collective denial theory has an answer for this. The only theory that doesn't have an answer is the one that says, The Simpsons is just a cartoon and none of it means anything. Now let's talk about Ned Flanders, because Ned is the character the show has quietly destroyed more thoroughly than any other. And the darkness hiding behind his relentless positivity is one of the most unsettling subtexts in the entire series. On the surface, Ned Flanders is everything Homer Simpson is not. He's kind. He's generous. He's devoutly religious. He's physically fit. He's financially responsible. He's a good father. He's a good neighbor. He is, by any objective measure, a better person than Homer in every conceivable way. And the show punishes him for it relentlessly. Ned's wife, Maude, was killed in a freak accident at the Springfield Speedway when a t-shirt cannon misfired and knocked her off the bleachers. She died because Homer was dodging the t-shirts and they hit Maude instead. Homer's selfishness literally killed Ned's wife. And Ned forgave him because that's what Ned does. He forgives. He turns the other cheek. He absorbs punishment after punishment after punishment and responds with grace and patience and an unwavering faith that God has a plan. But fans have noticed cracks in the facade. When a hurricane destroys Ned's house and the community rebuilds it so poorly that it collapses immediately, Ned snaps. He has a complete psychological breakdown. He screams at the town. He insults every person who's ever wronged him. He says things he's been holding inside for decades, and then he's institutionalized. He's committed to a mental health facility where it's revealed that Ned's relentless niceness isn't natural. It's the result of childhood behavioral modification. Ned was a violent, uncontrollable child. His parents, being beatniks who didn't believe in discipline, took him to a psychiatrist who spent years conditioning the aggression out of him through what amounted to behavioral reprogramming. Ned's kindness isn't a character trait. It's a psychological cage built around a feral child by a doctor who literally beat the rage out of him through therapy. Everything about Ned's life reads differently once you know this. His patience with Homer isn't saintly, it's pathological. He can't express anger because his brain was wired to suppress it at all costs. His faith isn't spiritual conviction, it's a coping mechanism for a man who needs an external framework to explain why he keeps suffering despite doing everything right. His forgiveness of Homer after Maude's death isn't grace. It's the programmed response of a man who was conditioned as a child to never, under any circumstances, allow himself to feel the rage that lives inside him. And the show knows this. The show has shown us what happens when the conditioning fails. When Ned snaps, the person underneath is terrifying. Not because Ned becomes violent, though the show hints at that capacity, but because the despair that emerges is bottomless. Ned Flanders is a man who has spent his entire life performing goodness because the alternative, the person he actually is underneath the programming, is someone neither he nor Springfield can afford to release. The darkest theory about Ned is simple. He's the saddest character on the show, not Homer, who's too cognitively impaired to fully comprehend his own suffering. Not Lisa, who's young enough to still believe things might improve. Not Burns, who's too powerful to ever face consequences. Ned Flanders, the man who does everything right and gets nothing in return. The man whose wife was killed by his neighbor's selfishness, and who responded with forgiveness because his brain won't let him respond any other way. The man who goes to church every Sunday and prays to a God who, in the show's own continuity, exists and has spoken to Homer multiple times, but has never once spoken to Ned. God talks to Homer. God ignores Ned. The drunk who falls asleep in church gets divine conversation. The devout man who has dedicated his life to faith gets silence. That's not random cruelty. That's a thesis statement. The Simpsons is telling you that goodness is not rewarded in Springfield, that kindness is not protected, that faith is not answered, that the system, whether it's Burns's empire or the radiation or the coma dream or the floating timeline, doesn't care about moral behavior. It cares about compliance. And Ned is the most compliant man in town. He was programmed to be compliant before he was old enough to choose. And his reward is a dead wife, a destroyed house, a neighbor who will never appreciate him, and a God who talks to everyone except the one person who's actually listening. Ned Flanders is what happens when you do everything right in a system that doesn't reward rightness. Homer Simpson is what happens when you do everything wrong in a system that doesn't punish wrongness. They live next door to each other. They've lived next door to each other for 36 years. And the gap between them, the gap between the man who tries and the man who doesn't, has never once closed. Because in Springfield, the gap doesn't close. The system isn't designed to close it. The system is designed to keep Homer at the power plant, and Ned at the church, and Burns at the top, and Molman in the ground, and everyone exactly where they are, forever, in a loop that never breaks. That's Springfield. That's the show. That's every mystery and every theory and every contradiction we've discussed for the past 2 hours, reduced to its simplest form. A town where nothing changes, where nobody grows, where time doesn't pass and consequences don't stick, and the same family sits on the same couch in the same house every single week, watching the same television, living the same life, trapped in the same loop that started in 1989 and has no end in sight. And now for the part that brings it all together. We spent 2 hours in Springfield. We've examined the radiation poisoning every resident. We've explored the possibility that Homer has been dreaming since 1993. We've reopened the Burns shooting case. We've traced Burns's impossible lifespan. We've watched a town vote to criminalize truth. We've looked behind Maggie's silence and found something extraordinary. We've counted the predictions that came true and the ones we forgot. We've followed Mona Simpson's trail from activism to exile and traced the wreckage it left across 3 generations. We've searched for Springfield on a map and found it everywhere and nowhere. And we've stared at the floating timeline until the loop stared back. Every theory in this video is different. Every theory uses different evidence, different logic, different assumptions about what The Simpsons is and what it's trying to say. But every theory arrives at the same place. Something is wrong in Springfield, something fundamental, something structural, something that goes deeper than animation style or episodic storytelling or cartoon logic. Whether it's radiation or dreams or denial or institutional corruption or the sheer weight of existing for 36 years without being allowed to change, something has broken the rules of reality in this town. And the show has been telling us about it since the very first episode, not through exposition, not through dramatic reveals, through accumulation, through repetition, through the slow, patient layering of detail upon detail upon detail until the picture becomes undeniable. The Simpsons isn't hiding its mysteries, it's showing them to you every single week. It's just that nobody in Springfield can see them because Springfield won't let them. And nobody in the audience can see them because we've been watching for so long that we've become Springfield. We've accepted the yellow skin and the 4 fingers and the ageless children and the billionaire who won't die and the town that won't change. We've normalized it all. We've become the people who look at a 3-eyed fish and say, well, that's just how things are around here. But they don't have to be. The theories exist because some people looked at Springfield and refused to accept the surface. They dug, they connected, they asked the questions that the characters can't ask because the characters are trapped inside the loop. And what they found, what we've been exploring for the past 2 hours, is a version of Springfield that is stranger and sadder and more beautiful than the one the show presents at face value. A version where Homer's stupidity is a scar left by a system that broke his family. Where Maggie's silence is the smartest thing anyone in the family has ever done. Where Burns's immortality is the logical conclusion of unchecked wealth. Where Marge's patience is the foundation that keeps the whole fragile structure standing. Where Bart's rebellion is the only sane response to a world that has stopped making sense. And where Lisa, 8 years old and brilliant and alone, keeps asking questions that nobody wants to answer because she's the only person in Springfield who hasn't stopped looking. That's The Simpsons, 36 seasons, 788 episodes, the longest-running animated series in American history, the most analyzed, most theorized, most dissected show ever created. And after all that, after all the theories and all the evidence and all the hours spent trying to crack the code, the biggest mystery is still the simplest one. Why can't we let them go? Maybe because they're us. Maybe because Springfield is our town. Maybe because Homer is our father, and Marge is our mother, and Bart is who we wanted to be, and Lisa is who we should have been, and Maggie is the version of ourselves we keep hidden behind a pacifier, watching everything, saying nothing, waiting for the right moment to finally speak. Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe we can't let them go because letting them go means admitting that 36 years have passed. That we're older now, that the world has changed, that the couch we sat on as kids while watching the opening credits is gone or in someone else's house or in a landfill somewhere. And as long as The Simpsons is on, as long as the loop keeps floating, as long as Bart is 10 and Lisa is 8, and Homer is stumbling through the door at 5:30 after another day at the plant, we don't have to admit any of that. We can sit down, we can turn on the television, and we can go home to Evergreen Terrace, to Springfield, to the family that never changes, in the town that never ages, in the show that never ends. Thank you for spending 2 hours in Springfield with me. If you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe for more. And if you're still awake, well done. Most people fell asleep somewhere around Burns's immortality. But whether you're conscious or drifting off, Springfield will be here when you come back. It always is. That's the whole point. I'll see you in the next one.